Off air with Ciara Kelly. Questions we didn't get to on air, we're going to take now, but we're also going to take any questions you do have. There was a lot going on Lunchtime Live today, so there's actually space for some questions, so please do get them into us and we'll try and get to them before we finish up.
Okay, so the first one is, I get paid $2,600 after tax each month. When I pay everything off, I have $1,300 left for disposable income. Is this considered good disposable income in terms of applying for a mortgage?
Okay, so disposable income is an interesting one. In general, what a financial planning rule would say is that you shouldn't be spending more than 35% of your take-home pay on your commitments. Now, commitments are things like loans and car loans and mortgages and rent and that type of thing. Your living expenses aren't included in that 35%. It sounds like what you're doing is you're spending 50% on everything and you have 1,300 quid left over entirely, which is very, very positive. The interesting thing though is the central bank does have, and the banks when they're giving out a mortgage, does have a rule, and they have a calculation that they look at it. They say, right, if this person gives us X amount a month for their mortgage, how much do they have left over? And around 1,400 quid, you're catching me off guard, but it's around 1,400 quid that you need to have for a single person. It goes up higher than if you've got kids and so on and so forth. But that's called the net disposable income, and you have to pass that test. General financial planning rules, to answer your question, 50% and having 50% left over to save is great. From a banking perspective and a mortgage perspective, it sounds okay, but I'd need to double check the figures for you.
Okay, so the next one is, are you able to get a mortgage higher than the value of the property you are buying? I'm buying a new house that costs $390,000, but I'd like to borrow $410,000 to furnish it.
No. You can't. So it used to be a thing, and in fact, there was a lot of problems it created a lot of problems for a lot of people where we had 100% mortgages. So that meant you didn't have to come up with a deposit, you didn't have to come up with anything, and you just got 100% of the purchase price. And then people were often pushing that a little bit by getting credit union loans or bank loans and short-term debt once they drew down the mortgage to furnish it. There is a reason why it's there, and although it doesn't feel fair to you right now, the reason why it's there is that there's two reasons. One, the central bank want to make sure that you're actually putting money into it yourself, that you've got into the habit of saving money, that you have a commitment to it. But the bank themselves want you to have skin in the game. They want to make sure that you are worried about the mortgage being paid because you've put cash into this thing, and if it all goes belly up, that you're going to be out financially. Whereas if they give you 110% of the purchase price, there's nothing like a bit of negative equity to demotivate someone to pay their mortgage on a month-to-month basis. If this is a loss-making thing, you're 6 months in, you're losing money on this thing, you bought it for 400 or 390 in your case, and you've got a mortgage of 410 on it, and you want to go out 6 months in, and the lads are going out or the girls are going out, and you really want to join them, and you're going, sure, this thing is costing me money. The motivation is gone. So there's lots of reasons why you can't, and I know it probably doesn't feel like it to you, but you don't really want to go there.
Okay, so what would you advise to do with a lump sum for a 9-year-old? Long-term options, as the money shouldn't be needed for a while. Okay, so we actually touched on this one on air, but let's actually give it a better answer now than we did, because Ciara couldn't answer the question because I put it back on her because she should know. What you do with it is if you've got money and you're not going to spend that money in the next 5 years, what you need to do is you need to go and get a bit of advice from somebody. Look, you can try do this on your own, and there's lots of people out there who would say that, but genuinely get some advice, get somebody to talk you through how to invest money long term. I was actually doing some numbers yesterday for a client where they had €40,000 and they were thinking about putting it in the credit union. And the credit wasn't XG, they were thinking about putting it on Post. And they knew they were their figures, so I haven't checked these figures. They knew if they put €40,000 into the credit union or into the on Post account that they were looking at, then in 5 years' time it was going to mature, maybe it was 7 years. Anyway, it doesn't matter. 7 years' time it was going to mature with €42,000 in the account. And that's what on Post we're going to give them back. No tax, no nothing, because it's on Post. 42,000. The reality is that the ECB, the European Central Bank, target an inflation rate of 2.2%. And what I mean by inflation is if your shopping basket costs you €100 this year, the ECB actually have a target for that to cost you €102 next year. That's what their target, €102.2 next year. That's what they're trying to achieve, because that is a good, stable economy if prices are going up at that level. If they're going up much more than that, the economy is running away with itself. If they're going down or going up less than that, well, then it just feels like a struggle and the economy isn't working as well. So the ECB is planning 2.2. That client's €40,000 was going to mature at €42,000 with on Post, but the cost of goods, whatever costs 40 grand today,
is going to cost €43,500 when that on post thing matures. So their money's not going to keep pace with inflation. They're not going to have the same buying power on that money when that thing matures as they do right now. That's why you have to look beyond bank accounts, beyond on post, when the money is going to be there for more than 5 years. And you have to look at things like 60-40 portfolios. We talk about them all the time. 60% stocks, 40% bonds, and then sit back, invest and forget.
Okay, so this comes in from James on social. So, hi, we are looking to build an extension to our house by freeing up equity in the house. At the minute, there's about 190k in, and we're looking to free up 100k. What's the best way to do it? Our lender says we need solicitors, etc., but we need to pay those fees, even though we will get new customer cash back.
Okay, so unfortunately, when you are using the house as security for a loan, there's always legals involved. The bank want to protect themselves, but you always also want to protect yourself too. So what's happening is if you're raising a new mortgage and you're being treated as new customers, so you are raising a new mortgage. If they're giving you the new customer cashback, it means that they're going to clear off the old loan and they're going to give you a brand new loan. And you need a solicitor in to take their name or the old loan off the title deeds and to put the new mortgage onto the title deeds to make sure it's all legal. You don't want to wake up in 20 years' time, having paid back this new loan you've just got, to realise that there was a problem legally and you now owe the original money, or it's still a stamp on it and nobody can prove that that loan was cleared off with a new loan and all of that stuff. You want to get it done right, and that's why you need to pay a solicitor. Unfortunately, that's just the way it works, but it's for your protection as well as the bank's. Be careful. Just make sure that if they're giving you a brand new loan, if they're giving you new customer rates, that I assume you're not walking away from a tracker rate in particular, but just have a look at the rates you're on and the rates you're being offered and make sure you're happy with that. And if you are doing a brand new loan, make sure you shop around to all of the banks before you commit to the existing bank that you're with. Just check the rates.
Okay, so if your savings are clean for a minimum of 6 months and there's no gambling going through your account, are you likely to get mortgage approval? I'm worried my current account might go against me because I spent a lot of my disposable income on food and coffee.
Okay, that's great. Somebody's listening to the whole gambling thing. Don't put gambling through your bank account. This person has already learned this, and therefore they know no gambling on my bank account. But it's not just about your gambling on your bank account. You're spending a lot of money. Think about the rocks and the sand. The rocks in your life are making sure that you have about 1.3 times whatever the mortgage amount is going out of your account. So if you work out how much the mortgage is going to cost you on a month-to-month basis when you get that mortgage, if it's €1,000 a month, ideally you want to be saving about €1,300 a month, and you want to see that consistently. Now, don't panic. If you're paying rent of €800, then you want to be showing the rent of €800 a month and then €500 a month in savings to bring it up to the €1,300. The idea being that you walk into the bank and you say to the bank, look at me, for months now, I've been paying rent of €800 a month. I've been paying savings of €500 a month. I've been really consistent with it. That's €1,300 a month of commitments. And your mortgage repayment is only going to be €1,000 a month. Now, Mr. Bank Manager, am I the best boy and I definitely deserve to get your loan. You're approving your ability to repay. That's what you're doing there. Once you've done that, I would suggest you can live your life whatever way you want to live it, except for the gambling piece.
Okay, so this comes in from David. So can you bring home an Australian superannuation fund and put it in an Irish pension?
International transfers of pensions have been an absolute nightmare for the last... They've just become more and more complicated, and we had a question on air about the UK. It's really... The legislation has changed. The compliance around it is really a difficult thing to do. My question to you would be, if there's a couple of million in the superannuation scheme, maybe it might be an idea to bring it back. The fact that you're calling it superannuation, I hope it's a defined contribution scheme you're talking about bringing back. And let's not get too technical. There's two types of pensions: defined contribution, where you have a pot of cash and you're going to buy whatever you want, or defined benefit, where you have a promise of an income when you retire. Depending on which one it is, you don't want to, in general, you don't want to touch defined benefit schemes. Sometimes you do. The thing about it is I'd like to know your motivation for wanting to bring the money back. You're going to incur costs, whatever way you look at it, and unless it's a massive amount of money, I would be inclined to say just leave it there and draw it down from there when you do actually hit retirement.
Okay, so Roger wants to know, with a 60-40 no-brainer, is an investor better to go with Irish Life, Standard Life or Zurich rather than go through my bank? And what is the minimum sum I can invest? Okay,
there isn't a chance I'm giving Irish Life, Standard Life or Zurich a plug and saying that this is the one that you should go with. No chance. Let me give you a bit of guidance though. One of the things that you do need to consider is the charges on all of them. Generally, with these savings policies and these investment policies, there's two ways that the companies charge you. One of them is an allocation rate. Now, what that means is if you put €100 in and you have 95% allocation, that you put your €100 in and they take 5% of it. They only invest 95% of it. That's just a charge off the top straight away. So allocation rate, you need to ask what is the allocation rate. You would hope to be getting 100% allocation, and in some instances you should be looking for 101% allocation. Now, why is that? The extra 1% is because if this is not pension money, if this is just money out of your bank account, there is a government levy of 1%. And a lot of the times the investment houses will pay that for you. They will hit you on the other end that if you take your money out in the first couple of years, they will take it back off you and more. The levy they paid for you, they'll take it back off you and more. But that's a decision you're going to make for yourself. So the first thing to check for is allocation rate. Is it 95, 96, 98, or is it at 100%? Try and push for 100%. The second thing you need to look at is the annual management fee. Now, annual management fees we can get really complicated about, but they're typically around 1.5% up or above or below that. Anything over 2%, we're starting to get very expensive, and 1.5% is reasonable if you are getting good advice and service for that 1.5%. So allocation rate, try and get 100%, if not 101 to cover the levy, and an annual management fee of around 1.5%. The next thing you have to start thinking of is the underlying funds. That's actually the biggest decision. What funds are the best ones underneath, and that's where you do need a bit of advice. The fact that you've got 3 companies there in your sites, I wonder, are you getting advice from somewhere, or where are you getting these 3 companies? You asked about the banks as well. In general, the banks are very stringent on these are the charging structures, and they'll be very clear about this is what the charging structure, and there's no flexibility with them at all. Whereas from the life companies and the ones that you mentioned and others would actually be a little bit more flexible in terms of the charges if you gave them a bit of a push.
Okay, so the last question is, can you please discuss cryptocurrencies, particularly XRP?
Cryptocurrencies, XRP, banana coin, all these funny names that are coming about all the time. Look, does cryptocurrencies make sense as an investment? I don't think it does, but I could be very, very wrong. The reality is cryptocurrencies could be the next big thing. I don't know if they are or not. And people who claim to be experts in cryptocurrencies, how can you be an expert in something that has been around for such a short period of time? Expert knowledge, some people believe, needs 10,000 hours or 10 years or whatever it is. They're not around that long. I do think that the underlying technology that exists around cryptocurrencies makes an absolute sense and it has got extreme value. My problem with these things is that there is really no limit to creating more cryptocurrencies. Like even the biggest one, Bitcoin, we don't know who made it up in the first place. You mine the coin and then the coin gets produced. But actually, what's to stop more being created? And when more gets created, everybody's devalued. But if you strip out all of that, it's a currency. We talked about inflation already today. A currency should be just in line with inflation. It should be going up and down with inflation for the place in which that currency is useful. That's not an investment. Trying to keep in line with inflation or going up and down, it's only the exchange. It's an investment. But forget about everything I've said just there. When I invest money, when we put clients' money away, one of the ways in which we do it is we do it in a market cap weighted form. Now, in very simple terms, about 54% of the world stock markets are in the UK, about 6% in the US, about 6% in the UK, and so on and so forth. When we devise, and that's how big is the stock market in the US, it's 54% of the world stock market, 6% in the UK, 3% in Germany, 3% in France, 8% in Japan. These are all the numbers, and this is how we divide up a client's portfolio. Cryptocurrencies would be it's less than half of 1%. So if you really want to do it and you're in a well-spread portfolio, put less than half of 1%. If you think it's the best thing ever, still less than half of 1% is about right for the amount of money that should be going into it. And it's not even anywhere near half of 1%. It's a tiny fraction of the overall size of stock markets worldwide. But it gets a lot of concentration, and marketing goes into it. Not marketing, but it gets so much interest, it's incredible. And that's because people made a lot of money on it earlier on. Lots of people have lost a lot of money on it in more recent times. Just tread really, really carefully and just be worried. I mentioned banana coin. That was it for me. The day I seen on Twitter, buy our banana coin, And I kind of went, this is just made up. Like, where does this thing come from? The XRP I've never heard of. I'm not an expert in cryptocurrency, funnily enough, because I don't believe you can be an expert in something that's around at that short a period of time. That's it. We're done for today. Thanks very much for listening. We will be back next Thursday at 2, I believe, and I'll be on Lunchtime Live as well next Thursday.